This is Roger's boat upside down. That's where the rudder shaft comes through. This is just a silicone flexible sealant, which I think I'll leave in place. There's a piece of wood here, and then there's the tube. This hole is about that deep. I want to fix this new stainless steel tube, which is 8mm in diameter, in there. So I've got to drill it out a bit anyway, and I think I'll drill it out to 10mm so that there's some room to put some new resin in and to be reasonably assured that it's got resin all the way around it. So I'm going to try just drilling it out from the top with a 10mm drill, but it's not that easy drilling into it without a proper anything to hold it properly. Might have it the right way around. This is going to take some time. It'd be terrible if I got this completely at the wrong angle, wouldn't it? Do it bit by bit. Oh, that was not. Well, I still think I need to do some steps. Right, that's done that. I'm thinking that it's going to go like that, and probably I'm going to need to cut about 1 centimetre off the bottom of that rudder because it's sticking out beneath the keel, and then that tube will stick out a little bit below this wood here. We'll cut it off inside about this height. I'm thinking that what I'll do is block up the bottom of this hole with blue tack underneath, calculate how much resin is needed, put it in the hole, let it go to the bottom, then block this up with blue tack and just plunge it into the resin down to the appropriate height, displacing it upwards, thus guaranteeing hopefully that we have resin all round this and make a good bond. This fit is quite good but loose, and even just inserting it 1 centimetre, I cannot blow through it. So I'm thinking that when we have about this length of pipe with some grease between here and here, that it should be pretty watertight anyway. Thinking of the problem of fixing these brackets to the rudder, I've got these stainless steel countersunk screws and these threaded inserts which are called nutserts or rib nuts. Unfortunately, if I screw this in to the maximum extent, that distance is 11mm, whereas the distance across here is 9mm, so I need to take 2mm off this nutsert. And there are two problems with that. Firstly, I can't put it in a chuck because of the flange here, so I'm going to have to grind it. And secondly, annoyingly, the tapping only goes halfway along here, and this hole at the top end, which I don't really need, but I can't tap it any further anyway. So I'm just hoping that if I take 2mm off the bottom of this nutcert, I'll still be some thread left which I can screw into. If that's so, then this is a good solution, because it's going to be flush on both sides. Well, I've just ground down one of these nutserts, and it's now, with the screw in it, exactly 9mm, which is what I wanted. But it's a pity they don't make nutserts the right size in the first place. I've had to re-tap this, or at least to tap it to clear the thread after grinding. It's a bit of a pain doing that, but I've only got 4 to do, so maybe I can get away with this. Right, well, at last I've got this rudder mounted on these brackets with a reasonably flush thing both sides. It's turned out to be rather a nuisance job, but I've done it now. I was going to put 2 screws through both brackets, but I've decided that 1 is more than enough. This rudder moves extremely easily at the moment. Countersinking this stainless steel has proved to be quite troublesome. This is the countersink bit that I'd had in my toolbox for years, and it very quickly blunted on that. So I went to Machine Mart because they advertised an HSS thing on the web, but it turned out to be a web-only product, so it wasn't there. Anyway, whilst I was there, I bought another countersink set. This turned out to be no good for stainless steel. So then I went to Tool Station, which happened to be open on Saturday afternoons, and got this 3-bit HSS set, which is absolutely fine cutting stainless steel. So that's good. So now I've got plenty of countersinks of all kinds. I was thinking yesterday of plunging this tube down this hole, having previously put some resin down it, as a good way of seating and fixing this thing. But I've decided against that now, because I thought there's a more important requirement, and that requirement is that the tube should be exactly collinear with the axis of the rudder shaft. Otherwise it's going to be hard to turn the rudder, and that's vital. Looking at this, you can see that in fact the shaft is pressing against one side of this hole, even though the hole is 10mm and the shaft is only 8mm. So what I've decided to do is to drill this out even more, maybe to 12mm or perhaps 13mm, and then I'm just going to have to poke the resin down there somehow and let it set like this with the rudder shaft in position, so that this tube is exactly coaxial with the shaft. Well, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do this, but I've got to pour the resin in here somehow in such a way that it gets down to the bottom. It's loose enough so it's going down, I think. Come on, you've got to go down. Go down there. That's it. Just wonder if that's full now or not. Have I made enormously much too much? Is that it then? find it hard to believe that we've got resin all the way down to the bottom there. Is that it then? Well, there it is, and I just hope there aren't any more bubbles lower down. I have used the rest of the resin with a filler to fill up those two low points that I mentioned in an earlier video, and I'm going to have to plane them off afterwards when that is set. So now we go inside and leave it for 12 hours and see what happens. Well, it's the next morning and I've come to have a look at the rudder. It's completely firm, but the only problem is that it won't turn at all at the moment, and it was completely loose when I left it last night. I had put this tape on here to make sure that there was no resin between the shaft and the tube here, so I can only assume that the problem lies down here where this blue tack may have leaked resin down there. So I'm going to take these things off now and see. Well, that's alright, it's evidently not fixed there. Yes, I think there's just been a little leakage through the blue tack onto the shaft there, so see if we can get rid of that. Well, I've used a penknife to get rid of the resin from here, but it's still quite firm and firmly stuck, and I think that could be because some of the resin that came down through the blue tack onto here was attracted by capillary traction upwards into the tube a little bit. That could be a considerable pain. I think what I'll do is remove this bracket and try bashing it out from the top. I can rotate it a tiny bit with this wrench, but I'm reluctant to be too vicious about that. Well, I've taken the rudder off, leaving the shaft in place obviously because I can't move it, and I'm thinking that what I'm going to do is try with this heat gun to heat up this bit here, the base of the tube, in the hope that it will come loose easily. I just don't want to apply a lot of force to it and loosen the tube in the resin, because the whole point of this job was to fix the tube waterproofly in the resin. Well, at last I've got it out, but I think that there is still a little epoxy inside here, inside the tube, so I'm going to kind of ream that out with a rasp and then polish the inside of the tube, which will be terrific fun, and it's a lesson for the future. Be very careful with waterproofing the bottom of this thing before pouring epoxy into it, because capillary attraction takes it upwards. Did I say I was going to do this with a rasp? No, I'm going to do it with a drill, except that I can't get the drill in at the right angle. Sometimes the old-fashioned methods are better. It's still not quite straight, is it? That's the problem. Right, just do it with my fingers. This hole is exactly 5mm, so there's no real problem there. I think that should be alright. Yes, we have liftoff. Bloody hell. Well, that was a bit of a palaver. I'd already polished the inside of this tube once, but I think I'm going to do it again now. After all that palaver, just to make sure it's nice and smooth inside. got to come out sometime. You can't put an infinite quantity of string in the top of a tube and nothing. Ah, thank you, God. Right. That's what we're doing. Right, that's got to be it. We can't spend all day doing all this stuff. I'm just shoving a bit of tissue with isopropyl alcohol in it. And the idea is just to get it cleaned off a bit inside there. Get the polish out now. Well, this rudder has caused me more fiddling than I'd like to recognise, but at last it is finished. It's completely easy to move, and in fact it will move just on small tilting of the boat. I'm still not completely finished with this, because what I want to do is to put a stainless steel collar here, so that if this rudder should get ground on rocks and get shifted upwards like that, the force will not be applied to the servo up here, but will rather be taken on this. So that I've got to do, but apart from that, it is at last finished. I'm still not happy with it because it's completely unbalanced. It's a big thing and it's unbalanced. The rudder shaft should actually come down here so that it's balanced. If the ship is listing, then the servo has to act against gravity, which isn't, it's just an additional load on the servo. In my view, a smaller rudder nearer the stern, which was balanced, would be a better solution here. However, this is the one we've got, so it's the one we're going to put up with. I've almost finished this filling in of this dip here. I don't know if you can remember how it was before, but now it's pretty flat. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to fill in these and with a little bit more filler, and then plane it absolutely smooth, and that will be that. And I've got this one I haven't yet planed down.